The passage we're going to do now is based on journalism, censorship on journalism in Turkey under the administration of Erdogan. Let's quickly summarize the passage before we look at the questions. Journalists are the watchdogs of democracy. According to the European Court of Human Rights, anyone who wants to control a country without being troubled by criticism tries to muzzle reporters, and unfortunately, Turkish President Erdogan is a past master at stifling the cries of freedom. So he says that journalists are the watchdogs of democracy, and anyone who wants to control uh, a country without facing any kind of opposition or criticism will first try to muzzle the press. And Erdogan, the Turkish president, is a master at this. As journalists from around the world converge on Antalya, which is in Turkey, to cover the weekend's Group of 20 summit, many of their Turkish colleagues are being denied accreditation. So journalists from all over the world are allowed, but journalists from Turkey are not allowed to meet the summit. Sidelining opposition media has become a bad habit in Turkey. It's happening all the time. Opposition media which suppose the opposition, is being sidelined, neglected, harassed. Later we'll find out. Turkey is ranked 149 out of 180 countries in the latest World Press Freedom Index. So you can imagine it's languishing right at the bottom. 4 days before the November 1st parliamentary elections, the police stormed IPEC Media Group headquarters and shut down its two opposition dailies and two opposition TV stations. Just before the parliamentary elections in Turkey, the police went and shut down two opposition owned newspapers and two opposition owned TV stations. After the control of management had been secured, 71 journalists fired. These outlets resumed operations with a new editorial line verging caricature. So they shut down these, they had a new management, they fired journalists. After all that was done, the newspapers verged on caricature, just towing the government line. The dailies, Bugün and Millet, ran Erdogan's photo on the front page along with the headlines, "The President Among the People" and "Turkey United." So basically, the opposition owned dailies and television stations were shut down. In its place, in its reformed version, they became pro government. Journalism is being murdered. The fact that the AKP, the ruling party for the past 13 years, recovered an absolute majority in parliament has not sufficed to halt the oppression. So the ruling party for the last 13 years, it has been ruling the country. It got an absolute majority in parliament, even in the recent elections, but that has not stopped it from oppressing the press. 2 days after the election, so why is he saying this? He's giving an example. 2 days after the elections, two journalists were jailed on charges of inciting an armed revolt against the state. Since then, since then, some 30 other journalists have been placed under investigation for terrorist propaganda or insulting the president, the two most common charges. So, the two most charges framed against journalists is you insulted the president, therefore, you'll be jailed. The other one is you are spreading terrorist propaganda. On November 17th and 18th, editors and publishers will go on trial for terrorist propaganda because of a photograph. They face up to 7.5 years in prison. Can you imagine? 7.5 years in prison for using a president's photograph, not in a very complimentary light, we can infer. One of these journalists is Can Dunder, already stood accused of spying by Erdogan, who has vowed that Dunder won't get away with it. So one of them is this editor called Dunder, journalist called Dunder, who has been already accused by the president of spying. Now, what is the new charge against Dunder? This editor, his paper published evidence that Syria-bound trucks leased by Turkey's National Intelligence Organization, a government organization, had, as suspected, been carrying arms. They revealed the story, so obviously they uh, incurred the displeasure of the president. For years, the growing concentration of media ownership in the hands of government allies has eroded pluralism and encouraged self censorship. The authors have also reined in the internet. Following draconian reforms, the blocking of websites has become systematic. Turkey is responsible for more than two-thirds of the requests to Twitter to remove content. The government does not hesitate to block the entire YouTube platform. So, one is censorship of journalists, but how else is this media being controlled? Government itself is owning media. All right, so there is no pluralism and there is self censorship. Oh, we won't say this against the government. Second is internet is also being controlled, right? No, Twitter maximum number of requests from Turkey, from the Turkish government saying remove that, remove that, remove that. YouTube entire platform has been blocked. These practices compound problems inherited from years of military rule. So they've already had problems because of years of military rule, and these internet blocking, censorship of the press, ownership of the press have only made matters worse for the people. What kind of problems have they had under military law? Laws restricting freedom of expression, a judicial culture centered on defense of the state and impunity of political violence. So they have a restriction of freedom of expression, they have entire judiciary is being controlled by them, and police violence is going on without any fear of control or punishment. Far from diffusing the political and communal tensions, the accelerating censorship and aggressive government rhetoric have sharpened it. Communal and political tensions have increased because the government is not reducing it. The government's own rhetoric is increasing communal and political tension. Demonstrators, egged on by government's discord, attacked. So the demonstrators are also incited by the government to attack people they don't like or parties they don't like. The G20's leaders must take stock of the course on which their host has embarked. So the G20 summit is being held in Turkey. Turkey is hosting it. So the G20 leaders must look at the course of action that is being taken by Turkey. They need a stable Turkey. They need Turkey to be stable. Why? To limit the spread of the Syrian chaos and to guarantee its people security and prosperity. So for the people of Turkey to be secure and prosperous, for checking the chaos in Syria, Turkey needs to be stable. But the government, the authors advises, the Turkish government must stop fueling tension, and for this, it is essential that truth can be told. They should tell the truth. That way, they will not fuel tension. Reopening the space for democratic debate is essential. Right now, there's no democratic debate in Turkey. So, you should reopen democratic debate, and that is essential for stabilizing the country. Freedom of information is part of the solution. So, this is the passage quickly summarized. Which of the following best describes the expectations of the author from the G20 leaders? What does the author want the G20 leaders to do? This came in the last paragraph. What did he say? The leaders of the G20 summit must take stock of the situation of their host. What is happening? Well, right? So that's what he says. The exact word he is take stock of the course of action being followed by their host. Take stock of what is being done. Know thoroughly what the Turkish government is doing. That's what he said. So, what are his expectations of the G20 leaders? The action taken by the Turkish government should be carefully analyzed. Whatever has been said in the passage, this is the passive voice of what he wants them to do. Yes, that take stock of the situation basically means analyze, discuss what the Turkish government is doing. So, A is the answer. Just quickly look at B, C, and D. The G20 summit should be abandoned. He will never say that. He said, we need a stable Turkey. That's so his expectations are not that you come to the summit and then abandon it and run away. The leaders of G20 should impose sanctions. Again, that will alienate Turkey. They want Turkey to be stable, to counter Syria also. Therefore, they wouldn't want to impose sanctions on Turkey. The actions of the Turkish government should be condemned unanimously. He didn't use the word condemned. It's an extreme word. Okay, if you condemn or put sanctions on Turkey, you are, even if Turkish government is doing wrong and you condemn it or you impose sanctions on it, you will alienate it. Therefore, the G20 leaders want a stable Turkey. So, and the author has not suggested these anyway. So, his expectations are they should take stock of what is happening there, carefully analyze, study, research what exactly is happening, get to know what's happening in the country. Therefore, the correct answer is A.